Welcome to the Pastors Podcast. This is Pastor Scott, and with me are Pastors Brian and Matt.
Hey.
Hello.
Waiting. That was subdued.
Yeah.
Well, he nodded.
That was subdued.
And you guys, we're doing a video too. The nod was for the video.
Do you want to explain?
For all the people tuning in via the video?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's questions about a video, lest you think that we're being extraordinarily weird versus the normal weird. And so Scott has got his phone.
I propped my phone up on a TV that's hanging from the wall.
TV mount, an CRT TV mount.
It's hard to even describe
Square.
It's hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
So sort of,
This used to be we're in the room that used to be the nursing mother's room.
That's right.
Is that what this room
Yeah,
is?
Yeah.
that's
So
what
that's
it
why
was,
that TV is hanging up there.
Yeah, and
so
that's why we have the speakers.
nursing mothers
Oh.
would come in here and be able to watch it on the original OG live stream.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
The original.
Great intro as always here on the Pastors Podcast. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the communication that you've probably received over the last couple of weeks regarding Regathering, regarding our hearts.
Buckle up. This is a long one.
Did you just ruin the beginning of my email?
They all have read it. They've all read it at the time that they're reading it.
What if I felt a little uneasy about that and took it out?
No, you got to keep it now. Buckle up. It's a long one.
So that's the
first sentence.
That's the first sentence of the email.
Does that imply
That
that
you
if
have
it's a
now
short one,
received.
you don't need to buckle up? That seems negligent.
I think when I wrote it, I think this is far more thought than had been put into it when I typed
most
those words.
most accidents happen within a few miles of your home, so
So
just
you
keep
should
that in mind.
always-
You should always
you should always buckle
even
up.
if it's a short one.
That's
just 'cause you're there a lot, though.
I contend to not
Statistics.
put my seatbelt on until I get to the end of my street, and my kids call me out on it
Why do you think
when
that
they're
is?
in the car. It's probably unsafe. It's probably because they know those statistics, Matt.
No. I'm saying, why do you think you don't do it until the end of the street?
I don't know.
Oh.
I
No
feel
way
like
they're
it's
saying
I
that.
feel like it's an ordered.
They love him.
It's an order priorities. I get in. I'm like, I gotta go. I gotta get somewhere. I'm usually running a little late.
Oh, that's
so
what it is.
once you're getting going.
Yeah.
And now, I feel like I don't need it until I get until I turn onto the second street.
Yeah. Relative risk. I mean,
I'm crunching the numbers. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Be careful out there, everybody.
That's right. If you
I will
listen
say,
to this podcast while driving, make sure your seatbelt's on.
I will say it has been a year since a lot of people have driven, apparently, because it's pretty rough out there on the roads right now. There's a lot more cars out, and it seems like people haven't turned their cars on or driven them in a while. So just be careful. People are losing it.
Or you just forgot.
Me?
What it's like to drive in LA.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah, with actual people.
with actual people,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true too. Anyways, a combination.
I'm
of
not
all
saying
that.
you forgot to drive, Matt. You have retained full capacity.
Yeah, it's everyone
for your
else that
drive. It's
stinks.
everyone else.
Yeah,
exactly.
This is the safety podcast with Matt, Scott, and Brian. What other things should you be safe about?
So we should probably be safe about gathering,
Yes, we should. Good segue.
which is what we're talking about today, not sarcastically.
Yeah.
So you preached a sermon. By the time this is posted, maybe even a little over a week ago, on Don't Give Up. People have received the email about Regathering. We're going to be preaching a sermon series in March, actually, on the local church, on what is the local church, what's the nature of the local church, how do we think about that, how do we think about that after this year, when the existence and where most of our participation in the life of the local church has looked different than it's ever looked before. And also over the coming weeks, we're going to be doing some different things with the podcast. You're going to be hearing from some different voices, particularly about just the work that God is doing in our midst. We want to highlight more and more testimonies, more and more stories of what the Lord's doing around us and in the lives of people, so that we can all rejoice in that together. But I thought that before we get to that, it might be helpful to talk a little bit just about our hearts for the decisions that we're making and for the road ahead. And then I wanted to kind of create some space for that. So first of all, let's talk about corporate gatherings, right? As we've been talking about our work in
Sunday church
Sunday church services.
In case corporate gatherings it doesn't ring a bell for anybody. Just in case.
Church services. Do we call them services? Is that like a part of our ideal
Or is it gatherings?
vocabulary? Or yeah,
I don't know if I've landed on an ideal
what should we call them?
term.
We're like 15 years in. We probably should land on an ideal term.
Well, I don't think it was an issue of like waiting to land. I think it was-
Probably should be more decisive, Brian.
He's still working on it. Okay.
yeah. Okay. Give me some time.
I will say when we say corporate, corp is body, right? So it's about the body, not like businesses.
Not business.
But
Fair
anyways,
enough.
That's why I
The
said
gathering
music.
part probably wasn't the most confusing part.
No, yeah,
Appreciate that.
yeah.
Um,
Always here to help.
So our
Safety
public
first.
services, our public gatherings, our Sunday services, those things.
All
Yes.
of those work. Yeah.
So we're doing we're going to be continuing to do the live stream for the foreseeable future. We're also continuing our outdoor services, which is interesting because I mean maybe only people that follow this stuff closely like us know, but we're technically legally allowed to meet inside right now.
Yep.
So
Thanks, Supreme Court.
why aren't we? Why are we continuing with our outdoor services?
Well, I mean, lots of reasons. One is the main one is that when you have a church full of different people in different situations and different levels of comfort, you want to do the thing that gets the most amount of people in the same space to be able to worship together. And so, like to be able to like going inside basically takes a segment of our church body and unnecessarily tells them, hey, like we don't really. It's not that important that you're here based on your level of comfort or your like level of health.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas going outside allows them to come.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a pretty small sacrifice for people who might really want to be inside to be able to stay outside because we have such a great outdoor space and the weather is LA weather. And like so to be able to be all together, it just doesn't make any sense to go inside and exclude certain people from that.
Yeah.
We have an amazing outdoor space. I was just thinking about that this morning. I was like, oh my gosh, we are so unbelievably blessed to have such a great outdoor space that is safe, accommodates more people than our sanctuary does. And, it's not perfect. Sound equipment is not as good as inside the sanctuary. And, it's harder to hear people sing and there's a lot of distractions and always motorcycles going by. Every time, by the way, a motorcycle goes by, I always say it's you, Brian. Oh, there's Pastor Brian. I actually called you in the outdoor service today. I called you Bad Boy Brian. That's why we call him Bad Boy Brian. I just made it up on
Did
the
you get
spot.
a laugh on that?
No, not really. No. But I just kept saying it. And then I
Do
said,
you think that's because they took it seriously? Or
well, and then I said, I just made that up. We don't call him that. And then there was one laugh. So I call it a win.
Was it Woolsey?
No, it wasn't.
Was Woolsey the one that laughed?
It wasn't. It wasn't.
he likes to support.
He
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
He does. He's kind in that way.
Although he was a little goofy today too. But
I feel
anyways,
like the two of you. I'm not sure if we're going to schedule the two of you on the same Sunday more
yeah,
or
let's give the people what they want.
yeah.
Anyways, the outdoor space that we have is really spectacular, and maybe we would be in a different situation if we didn't have the outdoor space that we couldn't regather at all except for indoors, and it might be a harder call, a trickier call with case numbers kind of being high as they are, even though they're coming down, and there's good news there. The reality is it's safe, it's facilitates worship very well. It is a beautiful space, and we are so blessed to have it, and we're going to use it to its fullness until we other decisions are made.
Yeah. And so I love that idea of trying to, and I think this is what we've done always, but it gets applied in a unique way right now, like trying to provide context to worship together for the most of us together as possible. That was a great sentence. But the reality is that that doesn't meet everybody's need, right? There will inevitably still be people that for like reasons of disability or sickness or whatever can't. And so we're going to continue to do the live stream. But I think, yeah. And so I love that idea of trying to, and I think this is what we've done always, but it gets applied in a unique way right now, like trying to provide context to worship together for the most of us together as possible. That was a great sentence. But the reality is that that doesn't meet everybody's need, right? There will inevitably still be people that for like reasons of disability or sickness or whatever can't. And so we're going to continue to do the live stream. But I think what we love about this outdoor service in the outdoor context is it's a place that we can both encourage people to sacrifice for others. Maybe they've already been vaccinated and don't feel the need to wear a mask, but we can all wear masks just so that we can be together, right? At the same time, maybe somebody's like, I'm not like super comfortable, but we've set up something that's safe. That, I mean, praise the Lord, we haven't even had a transmission in the last 6 months that we've been doing it because of the protocols that are in place. And so we can encourage people to come and gather. And that's why I think the way we've worded it is we want to increasingly over the coming months, Lord willing, as long as the situation continues to progress in the direction it's headed now, and I think the direction that most people expect it to, we want to increasingly encourage you to rejoin us in person. It's not saying, hey, you need to come join us tomorrow, but we want you to continue to be thinking about that, because joining in this way, joining together in worship is important. That's why we're going to be doing the things with children's ministry too, junior church. I was out there, I saw junior church. The setup's so great for junior church in the courtyard. It's such a huge blessing. And hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll also have pods for preschoolers and be facilitating that as well.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? You just dropped that. That's kind of like the first knowledge of that, right?
No. It should be in the email.
Oh, in the email. Oh,
yeah.
You will. Okay.
Yeah.
If you didn't read the email, though, or watch the video that's
So-
going
Or if
to
you didn't
accompany
buckle
it.
up.
If you didn't
might not have
buckle up,
gotten
if you
there.
hadn't fully buckled up, and you might have veered off in the midst of the...
It says, please take the time to read all of it, parentheses, thanks in advance, exclamation point, in parentheses, period. There's a lot going on in those first two sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully if you read all of it, you would know all these things. But Scott wants to tell you also...
about...
Yeah. Preschool pod is a cool idea.
So I don't have preschoolers. You two do. But it is not lost on me that like that is one of the most difficult logistical barriers for a lot of people in our church family is kids of preschool age, right? Toddlers. I mean, like in one sense, even like a newborn baby's easier because they're in a carrier. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's like they're in a carrier, right? You can like try a time that you can kind of hold them, but once they want to run around, and before they've had the experience of the structure of school, like there's this window in there that is it's probably been a particularly difficult hurdle for you joining the live stream, just as that is the context of your homes.
I've seen Brian videos of Brian trying to worship at his house, and it is complicated.
I think I sent you that video because I think you were preaching.
Yeah.
And I sent, it's really good. I said, but I think I only caught like a certain amount of it because of this, and just showed you on the screen preaching with all of this happening.
Yeah. It's great.
It is. And that's not necessarily made easier by coming on campus and our outdoor stuff. I mean, we have the family area, which is a huge blessing, and I think facilitates a lot of that. But we recognize that dealing with preschoolers is particularly difficult, and so for that reason, we're utilizing the protocols for preschools. We are in the process of developing a way that we can safely provide childcare for preschoolers, probably remaining in pods, probably a smaller number per classroom, probably utilizing parents, on a rotation to help in that and kind of keep the I don't know, exposure bubble small, but also be able to provide it, which we hope will help to lift a barrier for a lot of you families with young children. And so Jeremy and the team are working on that as we speak. And so we'll get details about that coming out. But I'm really excited about that because I do know that's a huge barrier. But I think when we think about this season, I think it's easy to get distracted a little bit by the logistics of Sunday morning gathering. The reality is we want to be encouraging people to be proactive, be intentional, even be creative in how they're gathering with one another individually and in community groups as well, connecting with one another. I mean, Matt, you talked about it a little bit. Well, you talked about it a little bit. You talked about it a lot in your sermon today. I'm assuming I actually haven't listened to it yet. I was preaching in Spanish, and so we're listening to it this afternoon as our family.
I actually talked mostly about other things.
Okay, good. Well, then why don't we use this opportunity to talk about?
I decided to talk about Ezekiel, just like 12.
Wow, this really was a shift from the teaching team meeting.
Yeah, 12 thoughts on Ezekiel, based on similar to your 12 things to do last week.
The goal is to see what kind of streak we can maintain with 12-point sermons.
Yeah.
See if we can.
Hey, real quick, Brian, how many tribes of Israel were there?
I believe there were 12, man.
Wow.
Wait, how many disciples were there, though?
Also 12.
Oh, wow.
I don't know why we have 3 points. It should always be 12. Where did the number 7 come from? The complete for 7 represents completeness. We've been reading through this with my kids. Well, I understand that.
I thought you were saying where did the number 7
the
number 7
existentially
come from?
Existentially, where did the number 7 come from?
Numbers are.
No, in the Bible, I've been talking about this with my kids as we've been studying through a couple of different things, but particularly with Harper through Revelation. And he's like, so how did 7 become the representative for completeness? Like, it's not the Trinity and it's not 12. Like, how is it 7? And I haven't taken the time to look it up. So this is my research asking you guys.
Isn't it just the 7 days of creation? It's like completeness.
It's 12. You have 12
days of creation.
Disciples. You take 12, you subtract the 3 in the
5.
Trinity, and then the 2 natures of Christ, you get to 7.
Oh, the hypostatic union in the Trinity. It's the 7.
Yeah. So if you kind of work with the numbers.
All right. I feel totally clarified.
Bible
now.
math
I
with
know.
Brian.
I honestly have no idea. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know anything
like
Old Testament wise that
what
gives an explanation for 7.
What in the nature of God that there's something there that we don't fully appreciate. You should study that.
There's got to be a Bible dictionary entry somewhere that you can just pop open.
All right. I figured as much. I just haven't.
It's a prime
done any
number.
of that. It's a prime number. All right.
So is 3 though.
So where in the world were we? Oh, we're talking about community.
We're talking
groups.
about 7. What is the number? Where did the number 7 come from?
No, before that.
Oh.
We got to rewind. Where we're talking about community groups.
Yeah,
we're talking about connecting
groups.
with one another
Yeah.
interpersonally.
Yeah.
Why is that so important that we should preach a sermon on it, that we should it should be a part of the email and letter communication that's going out, and that we're gonna do a podcast on it? Why is that so important to make sure we're talking about right now?
Yeah.
Wait. Brian's got
Matt
something
is
about
right.
7. Is it a prime number?
No, Matt's right. No, it
prime number.
actually tracks. So you take it back to creation, and it's because it's not the perfect number, and that's where I was getting thrown off.
It's a number of completeness.
Completeness.
Yeah, it
and
represents
so
completeness.
the 7th day of rest is a day of completion. So 7 becomes completeness, fullness, like the 7 spirits in Revelation, like that whole thing.
Yeah. So I'm so glad we had this conversation. That was exactly Harper's explanation.
Was it really?
My 14-year-old. He's like, it seems like the 7 days of creation, I guess. I'm like, okay.
That's exactly what Matt said.
I don't know. It's probably deeper.
What were we talking?
Well, and also the number of evil is 6, right, or something. So because it's 1 less than 7.
Is incomplete.
Because evil is a privation of good.
So
community group, regathering.
Why are we talking? So why is this so important to talk about right now?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that there's a lot of rhythms of our lives that have been very much disrupted in the last year, but I think our relationships with brothers and sisters in Christ have been massively disrupted, and the kinds of relationships, the kinds of discipleship relationships that we're called to have as Christians, I think we have we've lost a significant amount of priority and significant amount of intentionality in our Christian our relationships in Christian community. And so in this transitionary season, I mean, we've talked about it today, but there will be a temptation to kind of coast and kind of like wait until everything's fixed and everything's back to normal before jumping back into those relationships in an intentional way. And what we're kind of saying is, in this transitional season, let this connection point, let this intentionality in your Christian relationships with people in your community group, let that be a purposeful and engaged kind of posture for you in a season of transition. Something where you can re-engage if you've been disconnected, where if you've been not connected to anybody, not talking to anybody, not close to anybody, you now's the time to reach out. Now's the time to get back into the rhythm of Christian community. It won't be just in person. It'll be, still virtual for community groups, and there's going to be a combination hybrid thing probably for a while. But the reality is we need each other, and if you are someone who's been disconnected, which I think a lot of us have been in a lot of ways, it's not a season to coast. It's a season to reprioritize Christian community.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It makes me think of. I've thought of actually throughout this whole process a lot about Hebrews 3 and the exhortation there to exhort one another every day, as long as it's called today. And I think that in different seasons of this pandemic year, there have been more natural impeti. What's the plural for impetus?
Impetigo.
What's the plural for impetus?
I can Google it with the number 7 if you want.
All right. So there've
been
been
to help.
Impetigo is a skin infection. Sorry.
Oh, got it. So there have been different various things that have drawn us into relationships with one another, even different things that have shown us that, okay, wait, we need to exhort one another right now, right? In the first few months, everything was so new. Everything was so, in one way, chaotic. Like there was this push to be creative and to make it work. Even throughout the fall and the potential, there was a movement towards one another because the numbers were continually going down before it spiked again, right? And so people were reconnecting. And I think that right now there is a significant lack of motivation to push through again, to get creative again, and to intentionally find ways to exhort one another every day, right? Exhort one another consistently and constantly and regularly and with creativity. And it makes me think of this passage in Hebrews 3 where he says, exhort one another every day as long as it's called today. And the reason he says that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And I think that at the same time that we see that's a very real dynamic, right? In the midst of this, not only are we being kind of discouraged or worn down by the suffering around us, but there's also a real temptation to the deceit of sin, to the tricking into it that consistently and constantly and regularly and with creativity. And it makes me think of this passage in Hebrews 3 where he says, exhort one another every day as long as it's called today. And the reason he says that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And I think that at the same time that we see that's a very real dynamic, right? In the midst of this, not only are we being kind of discouraged or worn down by the suffering around us, but there's also a real temptation to the deceit of sin, to the tricking into it that not only keeps us away from one another, but also keeps us away from God. And so we need one another in each one of these seasons. We've needed one another in unique ways, and I think we need one another in particular ways during this part of this season for that reason. And I know that's not easy. Like I don't want to be like, so, push through and do it. Like I have a great deal of just compassion and empathy for reality of the difficulties of that. But I still think they're questions we need to be asking, wrestling through finding ways for our own good and for the good of those around us who desperately need to hear from us, as well.
I want to lean on the compassion part, because the reality is, if you're feeling extremely discouraged with your community group or the community around you, you're not alone. It's been hard. And if you feel discouraged with your own participation or lack of participation, this is a season of grace. It's going to be a season of a lot of grace, a lot of encouragement, a lot of compassion. God's not calling you into judgment or condemnation in this vision kind of we're casting. He's calling you to reestablish and reset those community rhythms that are so important for your spiritual health as a follower of Christ.
Yeah. It's an interesting time because you do have a sense, I think, that comes very naturally and does not seem to be wrong, that this is a time where we should be exhorting one another tomorrow. Like it just feels very normal and like spiritual in a way. It's like that's what this is a weird time, and that's what we should be doing. And then you add on the lack of energy and all these things, and it's a very natural way to do it. And it's an interesting verse to think about in that you also have the lack of interaction preceding being hardened. You're not hardened first and then you stop interacting, which is kind of an interesting dynamic that we don't normally default to. We kind of assume, well, it's usually that sin gets to me before, that's the reason why. It's like, well, no, there's a way in which these things break up until the ground, these interactions, regardless of whether they're on Zoom or in person or whatever. It doesn't mean they're not harder in this season, but it doesn't mean they're ineffective in this season. And the idea of the deceitfulness of sin, in that it's not going to present itself to you as an immediate wrong. And so like you have this cocktail right now of things that seem very normal and like okay. That the difference between giving yourself grace and saying like, or giving others grace and saying like, it is really hard, and let's show each other that compassion. And then by merit of the lack of interaction, yourself all of a sudden not being someone who gives grace. It's like you're being hardened by the tricks, the lies, the subtle, inversions that sin puts in you. That's just really interesting, and to me very helpful and resonant. It's very relatable to me, like that very subtle way of thinking that it should be tomorrow, like that, and how all those relate to each other, and how we've seen them play out in the world in certain ways, in not necessarily our church. I mean, I'm sure it has, but like in the church over the last year, there's a lot of ways that you can see hardening. You can see sin leading to hardening, and you can see that has some roots in the distance we've had from each other, and a just sort of quick and very understandable reaction of, yeah, it's hard now, so we'll do it tomorrow.
So it's so interesting. Okay, so we've got a little microcosm example of this that I think may illustrate exactly this point, because just yesterday, Laura and I had a conversation in light of recognize like a parental need conversation, in light of recognizing that there were certain things in our house and in our household that weren't working with our kids, and there was just ways in which we'd gotten into some bad habits with one another. There were some like ways in which I think even some of the things we were doing was just kind of feeding this like self-focused mentality, and we'd recognized it. We're like, okay, this is a problem. Like what do we do? And so it was late afternoon, and Laura and I were talking in our room about it. And I said, I think we need to make like some of these, or figure out how to make some of these kinds of changes, right? Maybe in some of our rhythms, because I think even some of the rhythms in our own house have like encouraged us towards selfishness, even towards one another. Sure. Right. There's just, and so we needed to work. I'm like, okay, we need to wrestle through this. And I was like, okay, when can we do that? I'm like, well, we've got some time we were going to spend with them, just some fun time. We were going to go do something this afternoon. We've got tomorrow, we've got, church, and then, Sunday's a pretty full day for us. And we have plans tonight, and, Monday's like back at school. And I was like, okay, maybe Monday night. Like, why don't you and I have this conversation about what we should do like Monday night, And she looked at me and she's like, well, I kind of feel like we should do it right now. Right. And I'm like, my guttural reaction was, I don't want to do it right now. Like, it's Saturday afternoon. Like, that's not what I want to do. This isn't even a super long conversation. It was probably like a half an hour, like some thinking and planning and some, even but like, no, like Monday night sounds great. Right. Like Monday night sounds like the perfect time. But the problem is, and actually we've been having similar half conversations for a week or two. And I recognized it, that the problem kept being, I was like, let's have that conversation Monday night. And then like Monday, like, you get to Monday afternoon and you're like, man, it's been a long day. There's a lot going on. Wednesday night's the perfect time to have that conversation.
Push it.
Wednesday's the first, right? And we kept doing it. And so thankfully the Lord granted wisdom through my wife to be like, no, we should have that conversation right now. And we did, and it was super helpful. But as you were talking, I feel like that instinct is in all of us. Like, actually there's a great time for that. And it's just going to be like in just a couple days, in just a couple months, right? In just a couple weeks, like it's going to work out really well when I do it there. That kind of keeps us from even the imperfect small acts of relate. Because I'm not even talking about, when we're talking about exhorting one another every day, as long as it's called today, we're not talking about like, okay, make sure you have hour-long conversations with everybody Like this, we're just talking about little things. It makes me think of in our relationship with God. Sometimes in our relationship with God, like He just wants us to check in, like touch base. Sometimes we're like, oh, I can't pray right now because I don't have an hour, right? I don't have a half an hour. I don't have 15 minutes. It makes me think of the Lord's Prayer where He exhorts us to every day. He's like, okay, I thank you, God, for our daily bread. Right? Every day, one of the things I'm doing is I'm just praying that you'll provide our bread for today, and I'm thanking you that you gave it. Like, it's not that complicated, but it is an interaction that continues to shape our relationship. And I think even in some ways, the small steps we can take today with one another are going to build so much more than the big steps we're going to wait and take when the time's just right.
I think that's huge. I mean, honestly, it's huge because a lot of people might be listening and feeling overwhelmed, like trying to jump back in and like go 100%. I know people who are like that. They're I haven't jogged or anything for 2 years, but I'm gonna go run 10 miles. Right? It's like like you gotta pace yourself. You gotta work up that stamina. It takes time. Little steps. It's not about this is gonna be. I don't even know if this. Some people are going to get this. Some people are going to lose it. There was an old Kings coach, LA Kings coach, hockey coach, and he used to say, "It's not about whether you win or lose. It's about whether you're winning or losing." And his point was, you can win a game, you can lose a game, whatever it is. It's the overall direction you're going. Are you improving? Are you growing as a team? Are you doing these other things? I think it's actually true for us in this way. It's like don't worry about some ideal, perfect, 100% already there, complete picture that you have in your head of what this can be. This is a call to take steps. It's a call to take steps, even if they're small steps forward towards reorienting yourself around Christ and what He's called you to with brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yeah, absolutely. So
I don't know if that tracks. I don't know if
I think it totally does.
Kings fans over there winning or losing.
It totally does. Do you think the Kings, if you were to rank the most popular teams in our church, would the Kings be in the top 5?
No.
Would the teams ahead of them all be Los Angeles teams?
No.
So we'd have like would the Lakers be number 1?
Probably.
Dodgers.
Would the Dodgers be number 1?
Yeah, I think Dodgers are wider.
Okay. Would the Lakers be number 2?
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay. Would number 3 be a team not in Los Angeles? like a baseball team or a bat? Like, would number 3 be the Warriors? Like, would number 3 be the
probably
the Angels?
It probably
Three
would be
might
the
the
Rams.
Angels.
I think 3 would probably be
Be the Rams? Okay.
I think it would.
Okay.
On a survey. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, like,
On a survey.
like if you're asking someone in front of everyone, like
I think number 4 would be a different team. Probably the Giants, actually.
Okay.
just because of the population.
NorCal
Yeah, like
Yeah, the
geographic,
NorCal
yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the Yankees or something like that.
Where would the Angels
Maybe,
fall? So speaking of teams out of
the
Los Angeles,
Angels?
outside of Los Angeles.
Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim.
Some inside sports baseball there for Scott.
The Angels would be behind the Kings.
Behind the Kings.
How many teams would we have to go through to get to a hockey team?
I think they would be probably like 7 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's probably fair.
Yeah.
Do you
Would
think
they-
you have to remind people about them before they write them down? Like if you just gave them a list of lines and put your favorite sports teams in order.
I do think hockey gets forgotten.
Would our Major League Soccer teams fall ahead or behind?
I think probably LA Football Club probably would fall ahead of
the Kings. You think so?
That's tough.
with
Wow,
Corazon
that's
Español.
true.
There are people we need
The
in this room for this
Sparks.
conversation.
The Sparks might fall ahead of the.
I'm not going to touch that.
Okay. All right.
There are people who know like this would be a genuinely interesting conversation for sports people. With
We need
certain
Stephen
people in the room.
Monty
Yeah.
and
We need to.
Choi.
Okay. I think we just scheduled a podcast.
Christina Lynn.
Yeah, like we scheduled a podcast for later in the season.
Yeah,
This
nailed
could
it.
be good. Okay, but on the topic of this podcast,
Come for the numerology, stay for the sports takes.
for the LA Los Angeles sports takes. So we
Where are the Clippers?
Oh, we didn't even mention the Clippers.
The
Clippers?
Chargers
They're-
are below the Clippers.
No, you think so? The Chargers are below the Clippers.
No one cares about the Chargers.
Yeah, the Rams are hot. Yeah, for
I
sure.
think the Clippers might be number 3 behind the Lakers. You think?
No. In our church?
Yeah.
No.
It's hard.
No.
Nah, probably not. All right. So we could do this all day. But the other thing I did want to get to was I think that the other temptation and I think you I think we've mentioned this in a few different contexts, but and we'll talk about it more. But I think that one of the other temptations of this season is when we're talking about our Christian lives, our lives as Christians in LA, to really focus on the regathering of us and the reconnecting of us with one another within the church. But I think this is also just a huge opportunity to both connect and reconnect with those outside of the church who are hurting, who are isolated, who have been hurting and isolated, and who desperately need more than just like a friend, desperately need more than just us to connect. They desperately need Jesus. How should we think as a church about the intentionality God is calling us towards for the sake of those who don't know Christ in our lives?
I mean, I think this is, like you said, this is a climactic time for a lot of people. It's even a lot of people in West LA that were not kind of directly or immediately affected in, say, like a lot of financial ways. Like maybe their life has looked relatively normal, save working from home, and being like a little like more isolated kind of relationally, but everything else has kind of gone apace for them, which I think is true for a lot of people in this particular area.
Yeah.
Not everyone,
Yeah.
definitely, but a lot of people. It's still climactic for them. It's still been unsettling and kind of a shaking of the foundations that is very easily papered over in kind of nice conversation. Like they're not going to open with, yeah, I'm actually reevaluating like my life in a fundamental way because I realize how little control we have and how much I depend on certain things I didn't realize. That's not going to be their like answer to how are you doing, but it's very close under the surface, closer now than I think it's been in a long time for a lot of people. And that's not to say that, what the church does is it finds the people who are, falling apart and swoops in. It is to say that that's the human condition. And I think we're more people are realizing that than normal. And so to have that kind of opportunity right now is huge for helping people understand what they're made for and who they're made for and what they're made to be and what's available to them in Christ. And on top of that, this is just the time when everyone has been, you've kind of had to keep people at an arm's length, kind of literally a couple arm's lengths for, a year. And as that begins to recede, it's going to be a hard habit to break for a lot of people, even though a lot of people are going to really want it to be broken for them. It's going to be really difficult. And of course, that's really complicated. There's safety concerns and questions about comfort level and all that we have to take into consideration. But I think we're the people as the church who are supposed to be the ones who are taking the initiative to say, look, as this is happening, we're not going to allow distance to continue beyond the ways that it's healthy. And we're not going to kind of junior high dance this and wait to see if you want to come, over to us and see, we're going to do our best within, reason and safety and genuine care for them and how they're feeling and what they're comfortable with. But I think it's our job to open doors and to take the initiative and say, look, we've got things to share with you, and we've got a home to welcome you into right now in a metaphorical sense. And we've got an outdoor sanctuary that we can invite you into in a literal sense. There's lots of ways that we can be the hospitable, welcoming, taking the initiative, relational place that it makes sense to be as the body of Christ on the earth.
Yeah. I think we forget that a significant majority of people in our area of the city live alone. And many of them probably have been very isolated in this time. And I think Brian's right that there's a huge opportunity for us to be loving neighbors representing Christ in our communities. And that there's an understanding and recognition of the human condition, maybe more so now than there was a year ago. The brokenness and frailty of life, the fragility of life, and the need for something true to hang your hat on. And I think it's a great opportunity for us. It's something that we as a church also need a reminder of, honestly, why we're here in Los Angeles. I think it's a question people are having. Why am I here? What am I even doing here? And I believe we are called here to represent Christ and invite people who don't know him to come to know him. And I think that's all part of this time of transition and getting back into a new normal at some point.
Yeah. It strikes me that a lot of people that don't know Christ, I think a lot of the people that I know, I get this sense from them that they feel the hope of the vaccine. They feel the hope of things returning to normal. They feel the hope. I was texting with some friends about, registering kids for baseball, right? Kind of like in the hopes that maybe, there's going to be steps back towards normal. And it struck me that I think there's a lot of people that are going to put a lot of their hope in the vaccine and in quote unquote normal. In one sense, also forgetting how normal wasn't that great to begin with, even in the depths of their souls, number one. But number two, also, like it's not going to be able to deliver. Like all the hope that they're placing in whatever turns society or the world are going to take in the next 6 months, like even if it all comes to fruition, even if it all happens the way that they're dreaming it'll happen, it still won't be able to deliver on the hope that they're placing in it. And so I think that's even more so why God is calling us into these relationships, into presence, into being with and alongside people. Because, I mean, to your point, Matt, whether it's being isolated and alone or just navigating this past year without the hope of Christ, without the Spirit, people are only going to increasingly grasp at straws. And what an incredible opportunity we have to offer them something real, to offer them something lasting and eternal, which I think in that sense too is worth the creativity and the intentionality that it's going to take to find ways, to find ways to connect.
Opportunity might even be short selling it a bit. I mean, I think about it's a good word. It's nothing wrong with saying that. I said it. But I think
Call me out, man.
Yeah.
Just say what's the
iron sharpens iron right here on the podcast. I at some level, I mean, it's sort of like who knew and who cared about epidemiologists, before about March of last year, right? You're kind of like, okay, and then all of a sudden, I'm just kind of imagining an epidemiologist about March, April, May, June, just being like, I don't know, this COVID thing's been really hard. I just kind of, it's hard to work from home. I'm just kind of going to mail it in. No, this is they do stuff when it's not pandemic. They have a job and they have a role. But all of a sudden when this, and I don't think they're looking around going guys, what a great opportunity for us. It's well, I mean, yeah, but this is what you do. This is your role. This is your job. This is how you serve. This is what you're here to do. And in the same way, that's what the church is. We're not kind of oh, cool. Here's a chance for us to do something we like doing.
Yeah.
This is our job. This is what we do and who we are in Los Angeles. We're people who do this. We welcome, we take the initiative, we reach out, we share the gospel, we reckon with the realities of life in a fallen world, and we talk to people about it. And so it's not so much a unique opportunity for us as it is, something huge that happened that now we don't go, wow, I don't know. I mean, it's a good opportunity, but it's hard. It's a little tough. As much as I get how hard this season is, and we do want to have compassion there, and of course we understand that. It's more just a self-conception. It's an identity question. It's not so much well, are you trying as hard as you can? It's more just how do you consider yourself here? Are you someone who, would love to take up an opportunity when you see it, or is this what we do? And this is a time when that's going to shine a lot more because of the situation we're in. We're being sort of called to action by the situation.
Yeah. And even to be explicit, when you say we, you don't mean pastors.
Nope.
And you don't even mean just community group leaders or leaders in the church. When you say there's an opportunity the church has, it's every Christian, right? Every Christian that's a part of our church family. This is what we as a spiritual family do. This is what we are here for. This is what God's both recreated us for and called us to in this place and in this time. And that, yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way to put it. I think opportunity is short selling it a little bit. It's not oh, okay, this is an opportunity we should take advantage of. No, this is offering the true eternal hope for the world to people when they're thirsty and hungry and struggling and hopeless. What a privilege.
Yeah, this is our thing. Look around.
Yeah.
If you look around the world, there's governments and there's all sorts of groups, that kind of exist and institutions that exist. None of them have this job.
Yeah.
This is ours. This is ours. And that's why it's not just pastors and it's not just every individual Christian. It is every individual Christian. It's us.
Yeah.
This is who we are, and there's no one else is doing this. And that's why to me the epidemiologist illustration or analogy is kind of the most apt one, because it's there's no one else out there studying that particular thing. That's not the thing, right?
Yeah.
That's literally their job because other people aren't doing it, as far as I know at least. And the church, it's definitely true. We're the body of Christ on earth. We're the representatives of Christ on the earth. We are the ones who spread the message of hope. We are the ones who step into these situations, even as we do in our daily lives when it's not crazy, and we take up the responsibility and the calling, and we go do it. And now for some people, it's gonna be really hard, and you're taxed, and you don't have a lot of extra time. That's fine. The question for me is more: do you realize that that's what you're a part of? Is that if you're identifying with that, and then realizing, but for me in this particular context, I'm gonna really struggle to put a lot of time in. Okay, fair enough. You got a bunch of kids at home, or there's lots of reasons why, but this is what we are. Yeah. And I think it's just trying to really identify and and not lose our identity. That's the thing that's going to really help. So I don't want to ground it in action steps necessarily for anyone, though that's important. And you do need to think about that, right? But I do want to make sure that it starts as a thing that is our identity and then moves out into how we live with our neighbors and our coworkers and our friends, and that we feel a sense of ownership over what it means to spread the hope of the gospel in a time like this, because it's just us, and this is what we are supposed to step up and do.
Absolutely. That's so helpful. I think we might have to revisit that analogy. I think that may even be one of the angles of that third sermon in the church series that we've been wrestling with and trying to figure out like one ways. I mean, I think that identity and how that pours out in the role we play as the church in the city is.
Well, Matt took the marathon one today and ran with it. Pun intended.
Science.
And you ran into the forest. There is no marathon. It's a gravel road leading to a ditch. There's a. You gotta listen.
I can't wait. I can't wait. This after actually, I'm gonna go home right now. That's what we're gonna do as a family. Because my Laura and Addison were helping out with junior church, and so I think we all kind of. None of us have heard it, Matt. I still have it to look forward to.
It's not going to live up to the hype.
Looking more forward to it than the next episode of WandaVision. I haven't seen WandaVision. Just all my kids keep talking about. Well, we're not okay. We are not going off to another. It's time. It's been 50 minutes. We're not going off to another tangent. We're going to close up now. We're going to wrap.
Thought about the number 13.
We're going to wrap. Thank you for listening.
How would people in the church rank the Marvel movies is the real question.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Start, the top 5.
Yeah.
This is the
Infinity War.
This is the dinner conversation at my house. Like every single night. My son actually just the other day was like, why are you so against us watching the X-Men movies? Like every time they're like, oh, let's watch an X-Men movie, I'm like, ugh. Like why do you not like X-Men, or like are they inappropriate? I'm like, no, like I'm just so sick of you talking about Marvel movies. Like I don't want more fuel. Like I don't want another like series of movies to like so somebody else can do that podcast. I can't.
Would it help if they ranked musicals?
I just can't.
That
I could do.
We watched Annie on Saturday.
The new one or the old one?
The old one.
Oh, that's good.
We've watched the new one before, but the old
one's really good too.
And Singing in the Rain 2 Saturdays ago. So musical
stuff.
Saturday in my house.
Good stuff.
Newsies will be next.
All right. Which one? The one with
the sun will come up.
Wait,
tomorrow.
So Newsies. There's one. Is it Christian Bale?
Yeah, Christian Bale.
Yeah.
Young Christian
Bale. But there's a recording.
I love how we said we won't get sidetracked, and then we just totally.
You can stop listening if you want to.
Yeah.
There's a recording of. I'm going to wrap up just after this, so you can.
Scott loves musicals.
There's a recording of the Broadway one with Jeremy Jordan, who
really?
is an insane.
I did not know that.
That actually is even better than watching the normal Disney one.
I mean, the original Newsies is pretty great, so I'll have to watch the other one.
Did you hear Matt hit more or less all of those notes?
I did. That was.
I had no idea if I did or didn't. A blind pig finds an acorn every once in a while.
Blind pig?
Yeah, blind pig finds an acorn.
Pigs find acorns? I thought it was a squirrel.
It was something my teacher said in high school. Even a blind pig finds an acorn every once in a while.
My grandpa used to always say it, but it was always a squirrel, which I feel like made a little bit more sense with the acorn. Anyways, thanks for listening, particularly to the last riveting minute and a half.
Even a blind pig finds a truffle once in a while.
We love you, and we'll see you on Sunday.